Hey, good morning. Good morning. We continue our review and summary of Ayin Beis, the conclusion. We're in volume 3 on page 1465. The Rebbe Rashab is laying out literally a formula, a blueprint of how we go about refining the animal soul in our Avodah. So we have a Nefesh Elokis, which is compared to the wick. In there, Hashem Nishmas Adam, the flame, the candle rather. The wick is inserted, which means that Nefesh Elokis, Hashem places, the neshama comes down into a body and an animal soul to the point they get engaged completely, like we learned, like a Mahus Echad. All the faculties of the animal soul, of the divine soul, are now working through the lens of the animal soul's faculties, both Moichin and Midas. So the divine soul retains its personality. But now it is seeing it things like, think of like the Koyach Hariyah, the power of vision, which is a sublime spiritual power, now sees the world through these eyes, through physical eyes. The power of vision, Lamaila, sees things in Ruchnis. It's a different type of Riyah Ruchnis, a spiritual vision. But when it comes into the body is the instrument. Think of it like the filter through which the Nefesh Elokis functions. So when the Nefesh Elokis understands something, a divine concept, remember the Nefesh Elokis is exclusively interested in godliness and transcendence. It understands it through the levushim, like he said, meshalim, dumyenis, examples, parallels, comparisons, through the seichel hativi of the nefesh habamis. Its goal is, of course, understanding godliness. But once it's doing that, that is the bridge for the nefesh habamis to begin to understand it. Where we didn't have that, the nefesh habamis would just be in its own world. At best, it could maybe defer or be subdued or in some ways at least temporarily suppressed, but Nefesh Habamis wouldn't appreciate. But now that it's B'Seichel HaTivi, like we learned, so Nefesh Habamis can appreciate the intelligence, divine intelligence that the Nefesh Elokis is contemplating on. And same thing with Midas, like he said, that the Midas of the Nefesh Elokis work through what he called Eifen HaTfa, the Nefesh Habamis. So if the Nefesh Habamis is by nature Chesed, the Aveda will be through Chesed from the Nefesh Elokis point of view. If it's Gvura, it's through Gvura. Like Shammai and Hillel, for example. Hillel looked at everything through the eyes of Chesed. In most cases, finding leniency in many halachas. Shammai looked through the lens of Gvura. Now, I'm not talking about the Nefesh Habamis, whether it's the Nefesh Habamis or it was the Nefesh Elokis Chesed Gvura. There you could argue as a Nefesh Elokis. But my point is that Avodas Hashem can be channeled in different ways. And they both are legitimate Avodas Hashem. So based on that, so even though the Midas, the Seichel and the Midas of the Nefesh Habamis on its own is antithetical to godliness because it's interested in self-interest, and even scientific academic wisdom we also learned is about the Yesh and the Gashmias, now the Ruchnias. But now you have a bridge. The Seichel and the Midas of Nefesh Elokis impact the Nefesh Habamis. And v'kach useder v'derech ha'aveda, says the Rebbe Rashab. That's the last thing we learned, the new paragraph, which I'll sum up now, that this is taka the order and process of Avodas Hashem, the Aveda of refining the animal soul, that it should understand godliness. And then when it does that, then when the Nefesh Elokis gets excited about godliness, the Nefesh Habamis, you have its attention. More than its attention. It's already appreciating, at least intellectually. So, Oz Dafka B'Yiseres HaMidas Nefesh Elokis Mispol Gam Nefesh Habamis Ba'avil Elokus. So the animal soul will also be mispol ba'avla lakus. And he goes on to say in detail that you need both. If there was no hasoga, let's say you only had the nefesh halikis understood godliness and got excited emotionally about godliness, but the nefesh habamis there's no understanding with seichel TV. He says, well, even if the nefesh halikis understands it well and also gets excited, it won't have any effect on the animal soul. The animal soul will be like a stranger hearing a language it doesn't understand. It won't be shifted or moved. It could be weakened, he said, possibly in the parentheses. On the other hand, you need the midas. Let's say you did have the hasaga, and also the nefesh habamis understands, but you don't see the nefesh halikis getting excited personally. You only see its intellectual excitement. Lo yiful gamkein also won't have an effect, even though the nefesh habamis understands it, because it will remain an academic understanding of God. Just like you understand science, you can understand godliness. So you need tzarech liyas shneim dafka. You need both. And then the parentheses, he actually added an interesting point that there's actual advantage in the nefesh habamis, because the nefesh halikis, he says, can have an understanding and can also have talumis libe emotions that don't affect the nefesh halikis in action, like he explains in chapter 16 in Tanya. He understands it and even appreciates it emotionally, but it doesn't necessarily come into action. It's just he recognizes that it's appropriate to love God. But when it comes to nefesh habamis, because nefesh habamis is fundamentally begins as an animal, like an animal that's only interested in self-interest, once it gets intrigued, once it understands godliness, he says, and it creates a difference. What? It no longer has the same strong, the stranglehold of chumri sa'elam, of the crassness of physical temptations and desires. He says, "Lotzeis min hachumish shel yirtze b'inyanim elu." Why? Because the seichel nefesh habamis in the first place was not a sublime seichel. It was all about shaykh lemidas. What's good for me? Now that the nefesh habamis sees that godliness has value, it understands that, so it has an effect on the nefesh. It could have, he said, yochelius. And that's why it poils on the midas of the nefesh habamis, takes away the chayis, esnem b'hem tzu, the geschmack from the inyanim hachumrim. It has the ability to take away some of the vitality, some of the passion in chumris, because you have an alternative. I gave examples of that. As soon as a person learns about superior interests, suddenly the interests that you had yesterday become like meaningless and are overshadowed by these more sublime cravings. But in order to have love for godliness, that's not enough. Not just enough this hasaga. You also need the nefesh halikis to get excited. Then the nefesh habamis. The first step allows the nefesh habamis to recognize that it's not the only option you have is to be materialistic and indulgent. There's also another option. But to actually have love for godliness, the nefesh habamis has to witness and experience the love of godliness from the nefesh halikis. So, bottom line, you need both, and that's where we stopped, I believe. Oh no, we went a little further. We said, and that's the nimshal. So this is the meaning that the shemen, the oil, remember, chochma of klippas nega of the nefesh habamis, nimshach achar apsila, is drawn to the wick, which is what that means. The shemen, which is the seichel hativi of the nefesh habamis, the natural intelligence of the animal soul, is drawn to the seichel of the nefesh halikis, because it's understanding it, so it appreciates it. That means, because it's all starting the wick, basically the nefesh halikis is extending and transferring over to the nefesh habamis this appreciation of an understanding of godliness. Then when you light the wick, you ignite it with a passion of emotions. Also, nefesh habamis, the oil will also begin to fuel that wick and feed that fire. And that's b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. So there's the part where the wick is, where the Sefer Shalikis is contemplating, and that contemplation is in the Levushim, is through the lens of the Seichel HaTivi of the Nefesh Habamis, so it understands. And then there's the actual igniting of the fire. That fire represents Ave Kadish Be'esh, the fiery flame of love of God, that it also will then affect the animal soul to love V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. So Shema Yisrael is the Isbonenus, V'ahavta is the emotional, the emotional experience, which also affects both sides of the heart, both the Shnei Yitzarecha, Yetzer Tev, and Yetzer Hara, Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Habams. That's where we stop. Wanted to just add one more thing. Just Hashgacha Pratis made me think. I saw a video on Friday. Someone sent me a video of really very emotional, very sad video, but also quite powerful. That there was this guy in the Congo, I believe, a guy his whole life. He worked in the I forget what they called it, the range with the animals, lions, tigers, rhinos, you name it, all these animals, and he to protect them from poachers and hunters and all these illegal stuff. And there was one lion that he actually saved its life, who was shot, and they had to tend to it, but they brought it back and healed it. So this black guy, guy died. I mean, it's like after 50 years of this work, his funeral, his family and friends, he was very well respected and very, very, very admired for all his work, his sacrifices, and so on. In the middle of the funeral, unless this is staged, this is the video as I see it. Middle of the funeral, suddenly a lion comes, and they all got scared. They all ran off, but the lion was not aggressive. It came closer to his body and just stood there and began to roar, like roar out of pain. And the lion would not leave. It stayed there throughout the whole funeral until he was buried. And after everyone even left, they realized at some point which lion, because they saw a scar on the side of the lion. So they realized it was the lion that was operated on, saved by this fellow. And even after the funeral, when everyone left, the lion remained there for a while. You have to see it. It's quite amazing. Why am I saying it? Because I remember, this was right after we learned what we learned there, and I said, even a behemoth, here's a chayir, this is a predator. A lion is not just some docile or domesticated animal. Now, even an animal can be affected by a person who does something for it. That means if nefesh habamis, which we said is superior to an animal, can be affected by the emotions of the nefesh elokis, and by its seichel, obviously. So I just saw it, Mamish saw it, and I said, wow, it's amazing. Now, I know this doesn't mean we should stay away. We should go ahead and try to engage with animals that are wild animals or violent or so on. But it means that there is something that they get. And that's even a complete natural, like he said, a hardwired animal that's not meant to hang around humans. And I'm not saying they're going to kill humans, but they're dangerous and so on. I just thought as Rocha Prati is watching it, I said right away, hey, interesting example. So I wanted to just share that. Okay.
Interesting. How did a lion come? He was not lost?
It sensed something. It lived in that area where he was, so it sensed. How do I know exactly? Who knows what lions are thinking, what they experience? We know there is examples of it. Those people who brought up animals from very young, like saved them and so on, that animals can come years later to them and they like reunite, and you see that. There is that emotional connection. There are quite a few videos like that, but I never saw this quite. And literally standing there, you got to see the video. I'll put it up if you want. I was just saying a lesson. If a lion can do that, so even our crazy animal souls maybe have some hope for them. I understand you can make the argument. You can make the argument that lions they're wired that way. They don't have any negative feeling. An animal soul of a human being can be far worse. The Alter Rebbe says that in Tanya, in Perich Chav Daled, that when a person does an Aveda, it's far worse than any wild animal out there because they're wired that way. They have no free will. And when we take our animal souls, I understand you can make that argument. But on the other hand, it means you could convince even an animal soul, even with its raw midas and emotions that are primal and all connected to its own survival, just as an example.
But you said, Rabbi, it was an emotional connection, which I think is really interesting because
Yeah, clearly. I mean,
if we could harness that emotional part of the animal soul, that is the strongest thing there is. I think it's stronger.
well, you ever hear a very powerful, let's say, really Chassidish song that makes you cry? I think that animal soul is affected by that. I don't think it's just the nefesh elokis, because the song
Totally.
touches people. So it's sometimes, I know people, they saw the Rebbe for the first time, or they go to the Kotel and, just have like a breakdown. I mean, a good one, emotional reaction, even though they're secular and never really. So that there's no question that Nefesh Habam is no matter how selfish or self-indulgent Nefesh Habam can be, it is ultimately a creation of God's. It's just that initially it's untamed. But yeah, these are all examples where that's why it's an art for the Nefesh Elikis to explain to the Nefesh Habamis, firstly the Seichel, and secondly the emotions, that the Nefesh Habamis should be receptive. I find the problem, by the way, is all about receptivity. When I speak to an audience, I always say to myself, the challenge is not to convey an idea to them. The challenge is to get their attention, because people are so distracted by their own things. They have stereotypes, prejudices, or other interests. The challenge is to get their attention, to get rid of any blocks and obstacles. Once you do that, it's far easier to get through to someone. It's not just about whether you're going to convey a good message. You have to engage that the person says, this is a little interesting. Let me listen. Because if there's no listening, it's like I mentioned about mediation. If you can't get two people who are completely in disagreement to open up, at least to listen, forget about change your mind or change your heart. If you don't have that, there's no engagement. So you need that. You always need that opening, and that's the truth. It's a challenge. How do you do that? How does a good teacher teach people who may be lazy or distracted, or more than that, have not been trained in certain principles? It's like a coach teaching someone how to play a sport, and all their habits are bad habits. When you're not trained how to hit a tennis ball or a baseball, so all your negative habits actually work against you. So how do you train someone that has never developed or has actually bad thinking habits? They don't know how to process something properly. This is a similar idea. So it's an art to learn how to convey, how to engage in a way that draws. I'm not talking about forcing it. We're not talking about any way that is imposing. You're talking about engaging. That is exactly the process. That's Avodah. That's why it's called Avodas Hashem. It will not happen automatically. It's not some magic thing. Yes, singing a song helps, but it's not enough. Singing a song, again, gets attention. That joke they tell about this guy is like puts in a classified ad that he has a donkey for sale. Donkeys are known to be able to carry heavy burdens, but they're also known to be very obstinate. So a donkey for sale can carry very heavy weights, and this donkey is unique. Whatever its owner tells it to do, it listens. Because not all donkeys listen. Okay, a guy buys the donkey for $5,000, takes it to his place, packs up all kinds of luggage on it or whatever, weights, heavy, things to transport, and tells the donkey to move, and the donkey won't move. Once, twice, three times, he says, "I'm your owner," and he waves his deed and says, "I'm your owner. You're supposed to listen to the owner." No, donkey's not moving, does not budge. So the guy runs back to the seller and says, "You promised that this donkey will listen to its owner." So the previous owner says, "What did you do?" He says, "First I whispered, then I started yelling at the donkey." He says, "No, you have to take a big 2x4, a big piece of wood, and smack it in its behind, and then talk to the donkey." So the guy said, "You didn't say that's the condition. You said it listens to its owner." He says, "Yeah, the hitting the donkey is to get its attention. Once you get its attention, it'll listen to you." So I'm not suggesting that's the manner of doing it. I'm just pointing out that getting attention is much harder than speaking to someone. Anyway,
All of this is good because to Nefesh Abamis of Ayid because it's Noiga. Is this also the same thing for Nani, Gimel Klipis of Mayors?
yes, first of all, because the Alter Rebbe says, Chsidu Elam, their nefesh is from Klippas Nega too. That's number one. And secondly, being that every non-Jew, especially today, as I've explained many times from the Rebbe, is the gather of either Chsidu Elam or potential, my answer would be yes. And you
But there
see
is a
it.
difference in
I
the
mean,
effect
but this
of
is
the
but we're not, but here in Ayin Beis, you asked the question, I answered it. This is not the theme of Ayin Beis. I answered it only for Shlema Se'inyan. This you have to go back to the classes we talked about. I always point out, go to page 230 in Chelik Yud Gimel Lekutei Sichos. The Rebbe has a whole bunch of artists on this topic. So I don't know if anyone has ever looked it up, but if you're really interested, that's the homework you have to do. I don't want to go into it now because it's not a discussion about Chelik Yud Gimel. I already said it at least 10 times in this class. That's not a complaint. I'm just saying that it's something that's come up quite often. Chelik Yud Gimel, page 230. Let me double check to make sure. One second. The Yud Beis Talmud's letter. I think it's 230. Yeah, 230. Remember, Ruach HaAdam Eilo Lamaila and Ruach HaBehema Yeredes Lamata is a pasuk on all humans. So all humans were created with Tzelem Elokim, right? So there's a Tzelem Elokim in everyone. The question is, their so-called Nefesh Habamis, or the body, what level that is. So it's a big topic. Anyway, are there any, I'm ready to continue unless there's someone wants to ask something. Any questions? No? Okay. So another little section here before he finishes this topic. And he's going to take us back, the Rebbe Rashab, to the previous page, previous 2 pages. If you remember when he laid out the key points of how Chachma of Klippas Nega emerged in the first place, which is the Shemen of Nega, he said that Chachma of Kedusha is like Chachma and Bina, that higher than the Shvira. It's only after the shattering of the containers, which creates the Midas, and the Chachma within the Midas, which is the root of the Seichel of the Nefesh Habamis. So he's taken us back to that, just putting it in context with what we just said about Shemen. So there's Shemen of Kedusha, like he said, Shemen Hatev, Shemen HaMishcha, that's Chachma de Kedusha. But the rest of the Shmanim of oil is the oil that you find in everything. Remember, we learned that in everything there's fuel or oil. So now we're learning about the Seichel of Nefesh Habam, is this fuel. The question is whether the fuel will be directed towards self-interest or will it be directed to the psila, the wick of the Nefesh Elikis, which will in turn it into a passionate fire of love of God. So now we're talking about the process of that transformation. So he continues now. We're talking now 7 lines from the bottom of page 1465. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. V'yeshlemer, he says, the line that begins the Nefesh Elikis. V'yeshlemer da Nefesh Habam is b'chlal nikra shemen. Al shem shorshem mibchinas hateyu. That the animal soul in general is called shemen. Before he said shemen is a level of chachma, of klippas nega, and from that rooted the Nefesh Habamis. Now he's saying Nefesh Habamis in general is called oil. Why? Because it's rooted in the world of Tohu. And remember, the world of Tohu has more energy than the world of Tikkun. However, it's not balanced energy. It's not in harmony with Eidos B'Kelim. That's why there was the shattering. But there's intense energy there. And if you may remember, the Maimer HaMagbi from the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe talked about why Shemen is the main fuel. The Psila will burn out very quickly if it didn't have oil, which would mean that the Nefesh Elikis, for all its power, doesn't really have a lot of fuel in this world. it's ultimately the nefesh habamis that's going to fuel the fire much longer and a much more steady way than the nefesh halikis. So he continues now. So it's rooted in Tohu. Shari hashemesh shemetzian me'ezeh davar, like we learned earlier, the fuel or the oil that we draw out from any object, like he said before from the pardes, that the shemen, even in daimim, he said the expression, even in avonim, even in stones, there's a shemen. So he says like this. So the oil you draw out from anything, hu hatechias va'atzmius, it's the inner core and atzmius and the essence. Shal eshe adavar. So now he does use the word essence. Earlier, if you remember, at the bottom of page, close to the under the paragraph on page 1463, he says the techias hapnimius, hamufcher. We call it define, the highest, the quality. What else did we use? We used a few other words.
Select.
That was the word you introduced. Yeah, fine. I like the word high grade. Primus hamufcher shebedover. Now he's also adding. If you remember, I said shmini atzeres shemen. Sometimes it's called the essence in Yiddish. So he's saying ha'atzmi shalei sadover, because the fuel, the oil within something is like its finest part. If you look at an olive, the oil is the main thing. It's like the fruit within. Ultimately, the oil is the essential entities, like saying like the moisture within something, or you could say like the bone marrow, the marrow. So he says like this. Okay. The tipa achas mashemen, and one drop of the oil, who koyach shal sluchis gdela me'esa dover al derech mashal. So sluchis gdela means a big jar. So you don't need to have a lot of oil. Oil is a very quality thing. That's why it says in some places shemen mefafpeya b'chol dover. Shemen always rises. Shemen will saturate everything. If you get some oil on your hands, not so easy to get rid of it. You get oil on your clothing because it's a very what's the word I want to use? A very powerful, potent liquid. It's not like water. So he's saying, Tipa achas ma'Hashem koyach shel sluchis gdela. That's the power of a sluchis gdela, of a big jar that has one drop of oil. The oil represents like the power within that sluchis. I think he must be referring to a Maimer Chazal or something. I'm not sure. I have to look this up. Whether it says somewhere in the Gemara this expression. So even though the jar may be a big one, but one drop of oil is enough to express, like it's like saying one drop of its quality, one drop of its essence. So therefore the Nefesh Habamis has this type of intensity, as we see. He's going to explain what that means. So now we'll understand why. Because the shemen is connected to Tohu. It's known, the Sfiras HaTohu hoy b'chinas HaKeser shall call Sfira. It's known in Kabbalah, Chassidus explains it, that every Sfira has all the spheres within it. Before we learn how Chachma exists in everything, that's the shemen within everything. But now he's saying that the Sfiras of Tohu is the Keser within everything, because Keser is very intense. Chachma, Bina, Das, and so on, more the conscious faculties, don't have quite that essential faculty of like Keser, which is like the Rotzen. So the Tfilis of Tohu is the Keser shall call Sfira, Shezeo b'chinas ha'atzmo shal ha'sfira. It's the very core essence of the Sfira. Because the first thing it says in Chassidus is you need a desire for Chachma, a desire for Bina. If you don't have the Keser, the whole Sfira will never materialize, will never be activated. So bottom line is the Keser within each Sfira is what he's calling here, like the Shemen within each Sfira, even though he said before it's Chachma, now he's saying Keser, but he's saying it's the Tohu. Because remember, we're talking about Nefesh Habamis. We're not talking about now Chachma of Kedusha. Okay. As explained elsewhere at length. And that's what the pasuk means when it says, the statement says, Raf Tvuz b'keich sher literally means an abundance of grain is produced by an animal that plows the field. A human being plows a field, even if they use a instrument. What is it called? A plow? Yeah, a plow. They can't do it as quickly and as powerfully as an animal. That's why you see today it's not really done because machines do it all. but animals that you'd attach a plow without tfuas, and it produced a lot more in say in an hour than a human being can produce. That's a rav tfuas, much grain, tfua, wheat, grain, that is produced by koyach sher, dafka an animal. That means an animal is more powerful than a human. So what is he saying? That therefore nefesh habamis, if you talk about sheer firepower, an animal has more strength. Obviously, a human being has more direction and more intelligence. But if you're talking about pure intensity, that's what a behemoth has. And that's what he's saying, is that the nefesh habamis in general is shemen, is like the essence of something. And here he uses the expression, kumei b'mashke, like when we're talking about b'mashke in a particular drink. Ascensium, in the drink called ascensia, I think the translation of ascensia in a drink is some form of alcoholic beverage, if I'm almost sure, I'm not sure. Or ascensia, does anyone know? Ascensia, I'm not sure.
Could
I
be
have
a
to look
drink
it up.
called absinthe.
I'm sorry?
Could it be a alcoholic drink called absinthe, made from a wormwood?
What is it made from?
Wormwood?
What is it? Spell the word. How do you, yeah, no,
ABSYNTHE.
what exactly, is it a drink?
It's an alcoholic beverage made from distilling a certain kind of, with a certain kind of wood called a wormwood.
Maybe it is that. I have to look it up. We need to do a little search. But anyway, what he wants to say is that there's a mashka called ascensia. It may be actually, like, sometimes you see these drinks today and they say it comes from the essence. They use the word essence. The essence of a pomegranate, or essence of another fruit. I don't know whether it's like only, it's not the actual fruit. It's only from its maybe that's what he's from. Not sure. So he says, when you take this very, what is it called? Maybe extract. Like they take from a fruit. They take it's like when you, or from concentrate. Maybe the word is concentrate. Like orange juice is natural.
Tincture, like a tincture.
Maybe. Okay, I need to look it up a bit. But the idea is basically when you take this type of drink, this type of liquid, and you mix it, and you mix it into another drink, and it's so-called, it changes its personality. It's like a powerful additive that can take water, or for that matter, any other drink, and add a punch to it, so to speak. What do they call it when you get something with a not a punch? What's the word? Not a spark. Spike. Like you spike something. Yeah.
Kick.
A kick. Spike, kick. Yeah, good. So he says, what is all this coming to say? That since the shemen is just a power, a little oil can make so much difference. So because it's like an animal with its intense power, he says the same thing. Every bitter of a faculty of the nefesh habamis has tremendous power. It adds much oil, light, to the nefesh halikis, like we see with oil. The more oil you have, the more the foam, the more the flame will burn. Or like I said before, in this context, the more, like he said before about the nefesh habamis, well, I don't know if I want to connect it to that. But bottom line is the nefesh habamis he's adding now is this power of Tohu. But Tohu has to be harnessed, because the intense energies is actually what caused the shattering in the first place. Because an animal, without being tamed, without being channeled and directed, could also be very powerful. It could also destroy a lot. So nefesh habamis, once it's harnessed, however, it adds a tremendous amount of power to the nefesh halikis. V'zeu shanefesh habamis b'chlal nikra shemen, and that's what he meant when he said yesh lemer, that nefesh habamis in general is called oil. Shu koyach atzmi. Oil is not just another liquid. It's a core power Next page, 1466. And Vahu. And now, Nimshach Acher Apsil the Nefesh Elikis. Once the Nefesh Elikis has explained the idea, the divine concept, in language that the Nefesh Abamis could understand, and the emotions of the Nefesh Elikis are also inspired by the emotions of the Nefesh the emotions of the Nefesh Elikis have also inspired the Nefesh Abamis, the emotions of Nefesh Abamis. So what's happening? This oil, this essential power, is now being harnessed and is getting this koyach hatoyu, koyach hakeser, the koyach of this essence of shemen, feeding the Nefesh Elikis. This is essentially what it says in the Maimer from the Alter Rebbe. But the Rebbe Rashab is adding Oisius to explain it.
By the way, I found the drink. It is actually called Essentia. It's an orange muscat, and it can be used as a mixer for cocktails to add. It has a sweet orange flavor, sweet, spicy orange apricot pear flavor, and it's used as an added. It can be used to flavor water or other cocktails. It reminds me of Hamtakas Gvuros that we talked about. Sweetening of the waters. I don't know if you could use that as a metaphor, but
yeah, I wouldn't go there right now because I'll talk about that later when we get more into the levels of transforming the Nefesh Habamis. But so you do sweeten the water, you could just bring sweetener in. There's the ultimate where the Gvuras themselves transform. But the idea, yes, of sweetening, the point is it's overpowering. The reason it flavors the drink is because it has essential power. If it didn't, if it was neutral or was just as strong as the water, it wouldn't flavor the water. So it has a certain I think I have to look it up myself. I also think he's referring to somewhat, not maybe specifically what you just said, but I think also in general applies to other drinks as well. Maybe other bottom line, other sweeteners or other additives, I guess, that help. Yeah.
I mean, extract is, I think, the word
Anyway.
you were looking for, by the way. But anyways,
No, we did use the word extract.
Oh,
I used the word
okay.
extract or concentrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay.
So,
Yeah, fine. So now, let's see here. So that's the story. So two things are happening. The Nefesh Elikis is harnessing Nefesh Habamis. In the process, Nefesh Habamis is feeding even more. Now you may remember what we learned Shcheda Nivanova, that Dafka, the darkness, creates the thirst and the longing, the Samoyan and the Rotzei of the Midbar, from the Midbar, that actually adds tremendous passion to Nefesh Elikis. Dafka Lamata. That's why the Neshama Lamata below says Shcheda I'm dark, but I'm beautiful, because it's adding that element. He's going to mention that soon at the end of the paragraph. So bottom line is, so here's the Yeridus HaNefesh Elikis, the soul descends, Hu levader l'sakenas HaNefesh Habamis, to refine and repair or adorn or elevate the animal soul, and to illuminate it, to the point that it transforms the darkness to light. That's the ultimate goal. There are steps in the process, but that's why the Nefesh Elikis comes down. So what's happening? The fuel initially was just shemen, and the animal soul on its own would have used that shemen, that intelligence, for its own survival, for its own existence, or just to understand Gashmias and Yeshus of the world, the crassness and chumrius of the world, like he said. But the Nefesh Elikis, the psila, the wick, is drawing that oil by teaching it, by studying with it, by contemplating with it, and through its lens, godliness. The emotions of Nefesh Elikis that get ignited and spark in turn an emotional reaction of the oil. And as such, Azharihu Nichlo Ba'er Eliki, the Nefesh Elikis, it becomes encompassed, absorbed within the divine light of the Nefesh Elikis. Bahainu, divine light of Nefesh Elikis, and there you have the Ner, Hashem, Nishmas Adam. The candle of Hashem is the soul of a human being, because you have the wick of the Nefesh Elikis drawing the oil, the intelligence of the Nefesh Habamis, turning it into an oir, a light, a flame of passion and love of godliness. That's the process. Now, he's going to add some more to this, because he wants to say it doesn't just stop there. The Nefesh Habamis will elevate all the way, because you could also say that this is a form of iskafia. Basically, you have, iskafia means you've subdued the animal soul, and you've harnessed and directed it toward the divine soul. But not necessarily that you've transformed it. But he just said ishapcha. Another thing that needs to be addressed, which he's going to address, how high does the Nefesh Habamis go? Does it go to Yechud Tata, Yechud Elah? And he's going to say clearly to the highest levels, because you want its total transformation, not just its cooperation, not just that it goes along and agrees, but you want it to be transformed to the point that the oil, like he said, the intensity of the oil is intensifying the very love of the Nefesh Elokis. So not only is the Nefesh Habamis agreeable, and not only is it going along, but it's also feeding and becoming a tremendous asset to the Nefesh Elokis by fueling it in this love. So that's what he's going to explain afterwards. But I want to stop here if anybody wants to ask anything.
I have a couple of questions. First, on the Inyan that the Nefesh Bahamas is Mashurish, is sourced in the Tohu. I mean, it seems like this is a direct explanation of how a birur, because the whole point of the Shviras HaKelim is to Masaken and Mavar, the Netzitzos from the Shviras HaKelim. So here you have a direct example of the subjugation transformation of the Nefesh Bahamas, which is essentially, a correction of the Shviras HaKelim. Yes or no?
Absolutely. We said it explicitly on the bottom of page 1463.
Yeah, I thought so. I just wanted to.
No, I actually referred to it. I spoke about it at length to explain how from Chochma of Gedusha gets to Chochma of Noiga, which is Shemen, all the Shmonim. And then he goes on, the bottom of the page, 1463, he talks about the Shvir, that the Shvir is in Das and in the Midas, and the Midas of Zah, that the Chochma Midas of Zah that come from the Kalim, from the broken, shattered vessels, which is then the Tikkun of the Rapach, the 288 sparks. You look on page 1463, top of 1464, he speaks about it.
Okay, and my second question was about the Midos. We talked a lot. Well, I listened to your class on Friday, and it was all about how the Nefesh Elokis engages the Sechel HaTivis of the Nefesh Bahamas, which is the intellect, and ultimately gets the Midos of the Nefesh Elokis excited. But we didn't talk as much about the Midos of the Nefesh Bahamas. I thought that it was Dafka, those Midos that are the primary fuel, because they're filled with this animalistic vitality, and they fuel this transformation, because they get so once you can grasp.
So your question is, what's your question?
Isn't it the case that once the natural human intellect is engaged, then it gets the Midos excited, and then that's what fuels the excitement.
That's fine. Where does he say otherwise?
I don't know that he said it at all. Is my question?
Of course, he said the Nefesh Habamis, and is the Shemen rooted in Tohu, the whole Nefesh Habamis. So when it gets engaged, everything, the Seichel and the Midas, it's more powerful than anything, because of the behemoth, like the part of this essence. That's what he just said. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, it is iskafia and not ishapcha, because, like Imperative Beis is explaining that it's chayzer v'neir achei tefillah.
Well, hold on a second. He's saying that's the beginning. It's iskafia. Ultimately, it's isapcha. He says it clear here. Say isapach. So, no, there's stages. There's stages in all of this. The ultimate goal is total transformation, isapcha, not just iskafia. There are all these stages. It's iskafia. That's why I just explained. You said, Achi isapach chashechel and nehera.
I seem to recall, and I know I'm gonna get like
Rav
I'm gonna make
Shlomo,
him.
one second, let me just make sure. Rav Shlomo, you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear, but it's only by tzaddikim.
No, that's only in the beginning of Aveda. It's not correct.
You're copying.
He says, Ache Yisapich Chashech L'Naheri. He says it explicitly. Look at line 2 on page 1466. He doesn't say tzaddikim, he's speaking in general. The ultimate goal is that when Mashiach comes, it'll be Yisapcha. And even now, we can reach different levels.
What I was recalling, and I'm gonna mess up here, but I want to put it out there so you can clarify. Is the inyan of the midos, it was like shiluach hakem. First, the emru vetzet ala frechim. So first, bina sits on the midos and nurtures them, and that I don't know if this is really, that's my question. Is there any shaykhus of that sugya to this, where first the bina?
Do you just want to make a connection, or is there something missing in this in
There's
the
nothing
concept that you
missing.
need to explain?
I just want to see if it's connected at all.
Just in general?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. I mean, there it talks about the training and education as a person matures. I don't know if he's talking about the Nefesh Habam is there. So that's the first question you have to ask.
Uh-huh.
There he's talking in general, just a person's maturity. Like even, like a child growing into an adult. That's one. So number two,
Once
there
the
it's more of a, that the emotions are more reflexive and more natural, mutfa murgish muskel, and then they become trained. Yeah, I'm sure it has a general connection of the mind training the emotions as they grow. In general terms, yeah.
And once the emotions are mature, they tell Ima I can go back to Abba, like we're gonna elevate, we're gonna serve as a fuel, a rocket fuel to boost you into a higher realm. Isn't that what we talked about at the
Yeah,
end?
but I don't know if it parallels this. It
I
could
know,
be
that's why
connected.
I
It may not.
asked.
I don't know. I have to go back and look at it and see exactly. Does it
Can
have
I?
some similarity? It seems
Yeah,
to have, but I would
yeah.
have to see more in detail
I
how he
just want to
explains it
say,
there.
yeah, to Mr. Rosenberg, we love it when you join us, but you're having problems with your audio today. Your microphone keeps coming off and on constantly, and it's setting a lot of noise into the class. So if everybody can just mute their microphones when they're not talking. Thank you.
Mine was muted. I just unmuted to answer you, but I'm going to mute again unless I have a comment to make.
Then it seems like there may be a loose wire because it's been coming on and off the whole class like 100 times.
Okay, if that's so, I apologize, and I'll try to figure out what to do about it. Thank you for telling me.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. I'm going to stop here because I have to go. I have to actually go speak to a group now that was here for Shabbos at the Ohel.
The nefesh or the keys, only in the way that it is done here, needs the nefesh abamis. But before she's coming down, she is the Meloi Hatekis in the full measure.
So why did we learn that Shcheira ni dafka lamata, the neshama goes even higher than lamaila? Remember that whole discussion? The neshama goes to a much higher level. The Shcheira ni, the neshama lamata, says to Bnei Yerushalayim that in this world of darkness, I reach a level even higher than you in Natzilus or B'riyah. Because the neshama reaches the etzem dafka below, like we learned, because of the deep thirst and longing. And now we're learning about the B'nefesh Habam is the shemen. The Nefesh Elikis above doesn't have the power of Tohu. This is the power of Tohu being harnessed, shemen. That's why the psila burns out quickly. The shemen keeps it burning. This is a big, big theme in the last maybe 20 pages. Okay, so we're going to stop here. Top of page 1466. I'm gonna stop the recording.